I want you to think about something for a second. You've been saving for years. You skipped trips, said no to things, transferred money every month like it was a religion. You pushed through the $50,000 wall, and if you watched the last video, you know exactly how hard that stretch is. And then one day, you open your app, look at the number, and it says $100,000. What do you feel? Most people assume the answer is obvious. Happy, relieved, proud. And sure, you feel those things, but here's what nobody tells you. There's something else underneath all that. A kind of quiet disorientation. Now what feeling that shows up almost immediately after the excitement fades. And if you've been there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't hit $100,000 yet, here's why you need to know what's coming before you get there. Because your brain goes through some real shifts when it first processes that number. Some of them are great, some of them are genuinely dangerous for your financial future, and almost no personal finance content covers this, because the content always stops at here's how to get to 100K and never covers what actually happens when you do. So, let's get into it. Before we get into what happens at $100,000, let's establish what a genuinely rare milestone this actually is. According to data from the Employee Benefit Institute Research Institute, only about 22% of Americans have $100,000 or more saved. That's roughly 1 in 5. And when you look at it through the retirement savings lens specifically, Go Banking Rates found the number is even tighter. Only 14% of American adults have reached $100,000 in retirement savings alone. The Federal Reserve's 2022 Survey of Consumer Finances puts the median transaction account balance in America at $8,000. Not $80,000, $8,000. And here's the number that really gets me. 78% of Americans have saved $50,000 or less total. So if you are either at 100K or actively working toward it, you are already ahead of most people around you. And I don't say that to make anyone feel superior. I say it because it actually matters for understanding what happens in your brain when you cross it. Your brain knows it's rare, and that awareness is part of what causes the psychological shift. Here's the first thing that happens, and it catches almost everyone off guard. Harvard psychologist Tal Ben-Shahar coined a term called the Arrival Fallacy. The idea is straightforward. We spend years believing that hitting a specific goal will produce a lasting feeling of happiness and satisfaction, and then we hit it. And the happiness shows up, and then it leaves. Fast. Faster than we expected. Ben-Shahar described it from his own experience as a competitive squash player. He'd tell himself, if I win this tournament, I'll finally feel like I made it. He'd win. He'd feel it. And then within days, the stress and the pressure and the emptiness were back. The goal was gone, and nothing had replaced it. This happens with money in a specific and uncomfortable way. When you've been targeting $100,000 for 3, 4, 5 years, that number lives in your head as a kind of future state. It represents safety, freedom, proof that you're doing it right. You've been living with this goalpost for so long that it has become almost mythological in your mind. It's not just a number. It's the moment where things get better. And then you hit it. And things are fine. Not transformed, not resolved, fine. That gap between expectation and reality is the arrival fallacy, and the reason it hits so hard with money specifically is because, unlike finishing a race or landing a job, a savings milestone is never really done. The account keeps moving. It goes up and down. There's no ceremony, no finish line tape. You just look at the number one day, and it says $100,000, and then you close the app and figure out what's for dinner. This matters because the psychological letdown from the arrival fallacy is one of the main reasons people stall after 100K. They don't consciously decide to stop. They just lose the motivational engine that drove them to get there. The goal is gone, and they haven't replaced it with anything. This is the loop I want you to hold on to, because we're going to come back to it at the end of the video. Now, here's where things get interesting. While the arrival fallacy is pulling one part of your brain towards stagnation, something completely different is happening in another part. Below $50,000, financial risk feels existential. One bad event, a layoff, a medical bill, an unexpected car expense, and you're back near zero. I covered this in depth in the last video. That 50K range is where savings still feels fragile, where one bad month can undo months of progress, and where the brain treats the whole thing as a buffer against disaster rather than actual wealth. So your brain treats risk as a threat to survival, not rationally, not consciously, but at the gut level. This is why people with low savings often make conservative choices even when a little risk would genuinely help them. Above 100,000, that changes. You have a floor now, a real one, and when you have a floor, risk starts to look different. It stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling more like an option. Suddenly you find yourself thinking about starting a side business, or leaving a job you've stayed in too long, or putting money into investments you would have been too scared to touch before. This is the permission effect. The money gives you psychological permission to think bigger because the downside no longer feels catastrophic. And this is the part I think it's undersold. The permission effect is one of the most genuinely valuable things about hitting 100K. Not the investment returns, not the compound interest, the fact that your decision-making expands. You start seeing opportunities you were literally blind to before because scarcity had narrowed your mental frame. There's research backing this. Mullainathan and Shafir's work on scarcity showed that people operating under resource constraints make worse decisions not because they're less smart, but because scarcity commandeers cognitive bandwidth. When you're worried about money, your brain is partially occupied with that worry at all times. Hit 100K, and some of that cognitive load lifts. You think more clearly. But, and this is important, the permission effect has a dark side. Because the same loosening of fear that opens you up to good risks also opens you up to bad ones. People at 100K who haven't thought about this start taking financial risks they don't fully understand. They get overconfident. They make moves they couldn't have made at 30K, but not because they're smarter now, because they feel safer. And feeling safe isn't the same as being safe. So the question isn't whether to embrace the risk-tolerant shift, it's whether you're going to direct it consciously or let it run loose. This section most people skip past mentally because it feels abstract, but I'd argue it's the one that does the most actual financial damage after 100K. So stay with me here. There's a concept in psychology called hedonic adaptation. The basic idea, your brain returns to a stable emotional baseline no matter what changes around it. Win the lottery, get the promotion, hit 100K. The spike of positive emotion is real. But then the brain normalizes, the new situation becomes the default, and the baseline resets upward. Research going back to Brickman's 1978 lottery winner study and more recent work published in journals like PNAS has consistently shown this pattern. The well-being boost from a major financial event fades faster than people expect, often within months. Nobel Prize-winning economist Daniel Kahneman spent his career documenting how poorly we predict our own emotional responses to money. Here's how this plays out at 100K specifically. Before you got there, your lifestyle was calibrated to whatever you were earning and saving. The apartment was fine. The car was fine. The way you spent on food and entertainment was fine. You weren't suffering, you were just building. Once you hit 100K, the baseline shifts. The apartment that was fine suddenly looks smaller. The car that got you everywhere starts feeling like the wrong version of who you are now. The restaurants that felt like a treat start feeling like the places you go when you can't afford better ones. None of this is conscious, that's the point. It happens underneath, and it's expensive. Because the purchases that feel like natural upgrades at 100K, a nicer apartment, a newer car, eating out more consistently, are exactly the purchases that compound hardest against you over time. Here's what that actually costs. Say you upgrade your apartment by $400 a month after hitting 100K. That's $4,800 a year. Over 30 years, with the roughly 7% annualized return you'd have gotten if you invested that instead, you've spent $453,000 in foregone compound growth. Not $19,400, $453,000 from one apartment upgrade. That number is not an exaggeration, that's the math. And the cruel irony of hedonic adaptation is that the upgraded apartment won't make you happier in 6 months than the old one did. You'll adapt to it. The researchers know this. Your bank account will know this too. But in the moment, right after hitting 100K, your brain will feel absolutely certain that the upgrade is justified. I'm not saying never spend money on anything good, but I want you to go into the post-100K period knowing that your brain's upgrade impulses are about to get a lot louder, and that those impulses are driven by adaptation science, not by genuine improvement in quality of life. Here's the one that I find most psychologically fascinating. When you hit $100,000, something changes in how you see yourself. You start identifying as a person with money. And that identity shift is real, and in many ways, it's positive. You carry yourself differently. You make some decisions from a position of security rather than desperation. But here's the problem with identity. Once you identify as someone who has $100,000, you start making decisions to protect that identity, not to build on it. And protecting an identity is a fundamentally different mindset than building wealth. Building wealth requires discomfort. It requires taking investment risks, leaving money in accounts you can't easily touch, tolerating volatility, making choices that look conservative to people around you. You did all that to get to 100K. But once you arrive, there's a part of your brain that says, I'm here, I made it, I don't want to lose this. And that protective instinct turns the same person who grinded for years into someone who's now guarding a position instead of advancing toward a larger one. Psychologists call this loss aversion, and Kahneman and Tversky's research is definitive on it. We feel the pain of losing something roughly twice as intensely as we feel the pleasure of gaining the same amount. Once you have $100,000, losing it hurts more than the prospect of gaining another $100,000 feels good. So you start making decisions that protect the number even when those decisions slow your growth. This is why so many people plateau at 100K for years, not because they stopped trying, because they unconsciously switched from offense to defense right at the moment when offense would have been most productive. The people who push through from 100K to 250K and then to 500K do something specific. They don't treat 100K as an identity. They treat it as a checkpoint. The number is evidence that their system works, not proof that they've arrived somewhere. That reframe is genuinely the difference between people who keep going and people who park. So, knowing all of this, the arrival fallacy, the risk tolerance flip, the hedonic trap, the identity trap, what should you actually do the moment that number hits 6 figures? 3 things. First, set the next number immediately. Don't let the goalpost disappear. The arrival fallacy is at its most damaging in the gap between reaching a milestone and identifying the next one. That gap can last days, weeks, or years if you let it. The people who navigate the post-100K psychology best are the ones who already know what they're building toward before they get there, whether that's 150K, 250K, or a specific investment account balance. Have it ready. The goal doesn't have to be perfectly defined, it just has to exist. Second, audit your subscriptions and recurring costs the week you hit 100K, not 6 months later. The hedonic adaptation impulse hits hardest in the first few months after a milestone. That's exactly when the brain is recalibrating its baseline and looking for evidence that your life should look different now. If you let that window pass without checking your spending, you'll look up in a year and wonder where the upgrade money went. Do the audit while you still have the discipline momentum from getting there. Third, invest something before you do anything else, even a small amount. The reason is behavioral, not mathematical. Taking investment action in the first week after hitting 100K sets a physical pattern in your brain that says, this money is working, not sitting. It changes your relationship with the balance from money I have to system that's running. That distinction matters more than the specific amount you invest. The people who turn 100K into 500K are not necessarily smarter or higher earners. Most of the time they just manage this psychological transition better than the people who stalled out. Let me bring this back to where we started. You opened your app. The number says $100,000. You expected to feel a certain way. What you actually feel is a mix of things. Some excitement, sure, some relief, but underneath that, something quieter. A kind of, is that it? That you didn't see coming and probably feel a little weird about admitting. That feeling isn't ingratitude. It's your brain honestly processing a transition nobody warned it about. Now you have the names for it. Arrival fallacy, hedonic adaptation, loss aversion, the identity trap. None of this is random. None of it is unique to you. It's predictable, it's documented, and it's manageable once you can see it clearly. The $100,000 milestone isn't a finish line. I know that sounds like a poster on a wall somewhere, but here's what makes it concrete. Only 22% of Americans ever get there, according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute. You're already past most people. The only question now is whether you use that as a floor or a destination. The brain shifts at 100K. Know what they are. Don't let them run the show. If this video helped you think about money differently, I'd appreciate a like. It helps the algorithm push this to the people who need it. And if you want to stick around for more, subscribe. I put these out regularly. Thanks for watching.